right, welcome to Minhag Dirigo, a Jewish Maine podcast. I am your host, soon to be Rabbi Brian Kresge, and joining me today is my beloved brother, Pastor Kevin Kresge of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm super. I'm glad to be here. It's always an honor. It's always fun to be able to be part of this. I love it.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this, and not just because it's a course credit for my rabbinical studies, but also because it is really fun shooting the old theological poop with you. And uh, and tonight's weighty topic is, of course, the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, which is always just such a delightful one. I I would love to start tonight. I was just doing the show prep. I was just pouring over some stuff on the United States Holocaust Museum website, and I found a really rare and relatively isolated letter. It's dated on October 11th, 1938, and I will I will of course share this on the link to the with the podcast. And it reads, "My dear Jewish friends and neighbors, this brief message comes to you from the pastor of the Winfield United Presbyterian Church with the prayer that if there be any misunderstandings in your mind concerning a Christian's feelings for the Jews, those misunderstandings may be dispelled. Needless to say, Christians have only a feeling of compassion and sympathy for the Jewish people who are being so sorely persecuted in some other countries, and we pray for them regularly. This, I believe, is the feeling of all Christians, though not of all Gentiles. Please remember that the terms Christian and Gentile are not synonymous. Many Gentiles are not Christians, and on the other hand, many Jews are Christians, and a Christian, be he a Jew or Gentile, has love in his heart for his fellows. Personally, I would be most ungrateful if I did not have a warm spot in my heart for the Jews. The one whom I revere as Savior and Lord, even Jesus Christ, was according to the flesh a Jew. The Bible, the book which contains the message of light and life, was written by Jews, the New Testament as well as the Old. The first Christians, those who brought into being the Christian church, were practically all Jews. In the light of all this, and much more that might be written, it should not seem strange that a Christian has in his heart a friendly feeling for his Jewish neighbors. I want to be your friend. I want you to be my friend. And if at any time I can render my service to you, do not hesitate to call on me. Sincerely yours, Hugh M. Newlands. And he was the minister. Hugh MacLeod Newlands was his name. And that
That's
was
fantastic.
Philadelphia Church. Uh,
I love it.
his
That's really great.
I love it too. I mean, it was really rare at the time. I don't know how widely that letter was distributed at the time. But it was saved by a Russian-born American rabbi serving in Philadelphia. That copy that the Holocaust Museum has, and I think it represents an increasing awareness among American Christian leaders of the time of the growing persecution of Jews in Germany. Because of course it wasn't it we got dribs and drabs. We didn't know everything that was going on.
Well, right. I mean, even the news that was getting out. I mean, you've been through Yad Vashem,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think we both have. And what one of the I think one of the best things that you can come away with is that information about what was happening was so squashed
Yeah.
because nobody was allowed to get anywhere. And as a result, the news was not getting anywhere about what was going on. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it took forever for the news to get here of what was actually taking place.
It's something that it's worth bringing up tonight because it's an interesting conversation for you and I because you know you and I both have the same background because we're brothers, obviously, but uh, we're both descended from Lithuanian and Ukrainian Jews, and on our mother's side, we're halakhically Jewish by birth. Um, One of the things as I was looking at our family history was we most of us came over in the 1880s to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Baltimore. Some landed in Texas ultimately, some landed in North Carolina, but most of us came in through Baltimore and to Lancaster and central Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
And we spent then from, as we made money, as we established ourselves, we would send that money back to the old country to bring more Jews over from the old country to here until 1924, which it's well documented in Ken Burns' recent Holocaust in America documentary. I'm not going to get the title right here, but it was, in 1924, we passed that restrictive immigration law that basically said no more Jews from Eastern Europe.
Right.
Uh, and that led to such tragedies as what's the U.S. the St. Louis, the tragedy of the St. Louis,
Hmm.
uh, and also put the kibosh on us bringing our extended family over from Lithuania, and what that meant, they were doomed. Ninety
Yeah.
percent of Lithuania's Jewish population was wiped out in the Holocaust,
Hmm.
and yeah, we have, if you Google Feltzer, you'll find some and variations on Feltzer with Yad Vashem. You'll find Feltzers and Abramowitzes and some Yaffes and stuff that that were murdered. And the town we came from was called Kupiscus. It's still there.
Still there.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and
26-hour flight or something crazy like that to get there. No, 17
really is.
hours.
It's yeah, and so for my wife, Leah, last episode we did a Yom HaShoah special, and I used some sound bites. We have her survivor testimony to the Shoah Foundation from her uncle Leon and her aunt Eileen.
Mm.
Very, very, they both survived Auschwitz. Very, very compelling testimony. Like she grew up with that like way more immediately in her
Right.
life than um, but what pains me is my older kids both had sat at the Seder table with survivor relatives of Leah's, and now Nezzy will had never have met a Holocaust survivor uh, in her life. She'll never have, or at least not that she'll remember. And so that living memory is going away for us too. But for us, we have that connection to it. We have that family genetic connection to it. Um, but it's interesting to me. Uh, I know what it means to me as a Jew. What does that connection to it to mean to you as a Christian who with a Jewish heritage?
To have that familial relationship to it
Yeah,
and yeah. Well, I mean, it's similar to what we've, I think, talked about in previous episodes, where, I mean, it means a great deal to me. I think it actually drives me to more deeply cherish my faith and maybe understand it more deeply, sort of maybe by default, than perhaps a lot of Christians do. And I say that not to like denigrate Christians. But one of the things that I've discovered as a pastor is that like, I'll sit down with a group of people and we'll be discussing faith, and I'll find that, these are folks who have attended church their entire lives and would not be able to explain to someone why Christ is necessary using just the Old Testament, which, the people who wrote the New Testament would have been able to do quite readily. And yeah, I mean, I feel like the average Christian of today should still be able to do that. And we're lacking. We're lacking that. And I think part of that is driven by the distancing that we experience, that has from some lines that have been drawn somehow between the Christian and Jewish cultures of today. Um,
we
that
have so
shouldn't
much in
be there.
common in that regard. By the way,
Yeah.
my classmates will chuckle at you saying the average Christian because we have a lot of conversations about the average Jew and the paucity the impoverishment of knowledge that goes into that.
Yeah,
And of course, that's our job. It gives us a very clear mission as
right,
theologians to say, yeah, learn.
right.
But
Yeah, absolutely. And but at the same time, it's like, man, I feel like well, like this past Sunday, like I joked about like our experience as kids, right? You remember the felt boards,
yeah,
right? We cut out all the people shapes, and we would put all the little people up on the boards. You cut out a felt, and we would just kind of like tell all the Bible stories with little felt people and little felt
yeah,
animals, and you know, it was a thing, and it helped us remember all the stories. And like we don't have that.
no,
We don't have that now, and none of those stories are, maybe, and I don't know, man. What I found is that even with having those, there's lots of people who either have forgotten them or don't understand how they connect, one, to each other, and two, to what it is that we say we value today. And it's like, okay, well, if we're missing these huge pieces of what we believe, then yeah, I mean, I've definitely got a job.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like
Well,
I've got job security,
with
but
that
I
job,
shouldn't. I want to put myself out of business.
well, I
Like,
hear
and
you. Well,
but
with that job, and the rise of anti-Semitism,
mm,
um, do you ever, I don't, I think about this quite a bit, when I go for job interviews, do I hide my Israeli flag in like when I'm
mm,
doing, not that I'm doing job interviews, people I work for, I'm not, excuse me, but, the, what do you ever worry, just like going back to the Nuremberg laws that established those racial classifications based on ancestry. You had a
hmm
Jewish grandparent that would make you a Jew by the Nazi law, and you would have been,
right,
even as a Christian pastor, you would have been subject to the same racial policies as every other Jew.
yep,
Uh, does that does that ever enter into your mind as even as a Christian pastor?
100%. And because even as a Christian in college, I was attending campus events that were pro-Israel and Jewish events and like campus life stuff, and were harassed by neo-Nazis and in
Gosh,
the
even
area.
even
Yeah, oh
back
yeah,
then, even
yeah.
wow.
And it was already a thing. And I mean, we were in Indiana County,
I was gonna say
like
IUP was definitely it's sort
I
of
mean,
like Center County. Like you get outside of Penn State area, and it's
yeah,
just there's a lot of neo-Nazis. The
yeah.
story
They don't.
there's
It's like
an
they don't have anything better to do. Like you got Jimmy Stewart and making fun of Jews.
yeah,
It's like,
and well
sorry, no, it's really
no,
not
it's
that bad.
true.
But
There
like,
is,
uh,
but I will say that there up in Center County at least there is an earless or at least a partially earless neo-Nazi, and I hope he remembers me. So,
I mean, it
that's a
was,
story for another day. But
yeah, it only happened like I want to say twice while I was there, and it was fairly mild. There was some harassment, but it still unsettles you.
it does.
Like even the like even when somebody just shows up and is looking at you sideways, like you know, you know, and like even today, if I go to say work where you have that interview and somebody knows, like you talk about it and somebody knows, there's that discomfort. Like I've had some rather open questions asked of me at work that make me wonder, like, why are you asking me this question? And
Yeah.
it's not meant, I think, in any kind of harmful way or in such a like I think it's fairly innocent actually. They just want to know. But it's like they want to know more, really. They're curious. But it's like there's such an awkwardness to it that it still kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, well, where could this go if this does go sideways?
It,
Like
yeah,
that there's okay, so now we've had this conversation, like, what's next?
yeah.
So
Gives you pause.
yeah.
And I was just at a conference in Baltimore last week. And, it was a healthcare related stuff, and I try to keep my professional life separate from my clerical life, of course, but it does inform one informs the other quite a bit. But there was only other one, it's doctors and healthcare administrators, and there's only one other guy with a yarmulke running around besides myself, and but I guess you get acclimated to it, but there is some concern with traveling these days and those things, and I don't know. But circling it back, do you worry about professional consequences as a Christian pastor, especially in a denomination that's increasingly hostile to the concept of Zionism and Israel?
Oh
Do you
yeah,
worry
100%.
professionally at all?
100%. Like I've been made to feel very unwelcome within the United Methodist denomination. I mean, the very fact that, like, in 2024, they basically signed up for the BDS movement. They divested fully from funds that, you know, they fully divested from Israel. Any fund that had anything to do with Israel, they divested from that. They're wholesale into the public, like there's all the genociding and the protesting, and you see people show up with the Arafat style, just the cafes, dude. Like it just drives me insane when I see that, because it's just like they don't understand what that represents.
Do you
Like,
do you feel like there's a corollary here? There's no organized push to do this like from a central figure, but do
no,
you ever feel like there's a corollary between this and how the Third Reich neutralized Protestant churches in the
yeah.
Holocaust?
Oh yeah, I mean they would be so easily weaponized because they're such a, and I use this term not in a biblical fashion because it's condemned scripturally, but they're useful idiots in the sense that they would happily protest, and they would happily uh, turn on the people that they would disagree with because I've seen them do it. Um, and they're glad to do it. They're glad to turn on the people who they think they're against because they're the bad guy. And I've seen them do it. And I when I'm made to feel so uncomfortable that I don't feel like I can safely go to our annual conference in New Jersey. And that's saying something, considering I'm over 6 feet tall. I am not a small man. But when I've got, a crowd of 50 to 60 people standing there wearing that, and they know who I am, and they know what I am, and they know what I believe and what I support, because I'm not exactly quiet about it. Um, you know, I I don't exactly feel comfortable walking around them. And I've made that abundantly clear to our bishops. I've made it abundantly clear to the leadership that until such time as they put that to bed and stop people from doing that stuff, I will not be attending because it is not okay. They're othering me. They're othering anyone like me. And meanwhile, at the same time, we'll have the performative Jews who show up wearing their prayer shawls and wandering around the room as Jewish pastors and doing their little thing. And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
like it's a show.
it
Everything's a show.
It really is, and it makes you realize just how, I mean, it has always been the history of, both Christianity and Judaism, our theological history. Um, the volume, you could fill a cup with truly righteous people, and everybody thinks they're
Thimble, a
righteous.
thimble, a thimble.
Yeah, I was being generous, I suppose,
Yeah.
but like that we look we look at it how the Reich Church folded so quickly in the face of prevailing sentiments. How the Catholic Church deferred, and they'd call out the excesses of Hitler, but
hmm
nobody ever could bring themselves. And this is a very familiar thread to me. Like when they see all the horrors in the world, they can very specifically, and you saw this with the Catholic Church in World War II, you saw this with German Protestant denominations, they could call out uh, and non-abstractly the horrors facing everybody but Jews. And then when it was the Jews' turn, just like today, it's very obliquely spoken of. If they had Islamophobia back then, they would have said we need to root out Islamophobia too, along because they'd always make sure to include that with it. And
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, we know that the Pope was placating Mussolini.
yeah,
I mean, they knew that like if he'd have pushed too far, if he'd have pushed Hitler too far, uh, Mussolini being Hitler's errand boy there in Italy would have just, I mean, they'd have just overtaken the Vatican and been like, okay, well, this is ours now.
yeah.
And that, I mean, that would have been that. It would have been the end of the Catholic Church, really.
I mean,
And
they
we
managed.
wouldn't even know what they managed to survive.
Yeah, and the Catholic it's not like the Catholic Church was completely powerless. I mean,
No.
they really did manage to stop the euthanasia program.
Yes.
Um, even after it had already killed hundreds of thousands,
Yeah.
at least so it's not like they were completely powerless.
Right.
It's
They did manage some things, but not like they it's not like they weren't completely ineffective, but it's easy to but it's also easy for us to look back from now and say like, okay, well they could have done more, but I don't know. I don't like being that.
well, we
Yeah.
if it was us, we'd have been under the gun.
Well,
It's
we would not have been able. Yeah, we wouldn't have been there.
we just wouldn't have been. It's
Yeah,
really
exactly. Yeah.
um the I, it's funny. One of the things in the book that's the source material for this program. We talk about, um, academically and in our circles, and even the observance of Yom HaShoah a couple weeks ago. We don't like using the word Holocaust because uh, it's Greek. It's a Greek translation of the Hebrew word "olah" for whole burnt offering. And of course, because we all went to, the crematoria was the one of the striking features of the disposal of the Jewish people. Every single part of it was anathema to a Jew. I mean, we were buried in the ground, intact, not embalmed. Uh, everything was such a desecration of us
hmm
that we tend to use the term Shoah because it's catastrophe and as opposed to being like a sacrifice, which is the implications of the word Holocaust. And really, for 20 years after the war, very little was said or written about it, to the degree that it is now. Uh, and I think one of the things that, like, the themes that I'd love to address tonight, between you and I know you and I are of the same mind on this, is, um, for us, is the Holocaust a unique disaster that befell that happened to the Jewish people, or does it exist on a continuum of similar catastrophes that should be the lessons of which should be universalized?
Mm.
Um, and I think that's my frustration with today is that the prevailing Christian sentiment, and we saw it a couple, or last year our rabbi did a great ecumenical program at a church in Bangor, and they brought in a leading, I think it was, I think it was Episcopalian, I might be wrong. They brought in a leading Episcopalian figure from out of state, and he was one of those types that universalized the meaning of the Holocaust. And our rabbi really had a it was really collegial, but a really strong reprimand for that in his program. That this is not some universal horror. This began with the Wannsee Conference, with the problem statement was the Jews, and the solution was to eradicate the Jews. And yeah, there were other groups caught up in this, but it was principally um, a moment in time when they decided that they were going to inflict so much suffering and then ultimately extermination on us. And I say us because it's us. It's
Yeah, yeah,
um, I but what we don't also at the same time want it to dominate modern Jewish Christian relations, especially here in the United States. I don't think that, they're debating it at a church, but the reality is, American Christianity and Jews have had a very long and relatively decent, peaceful, more better than anywhere else in the world where our religions have intersected. The United States has been probably the model for the way it should be. And I don't like to emphasize it too much here because it implies culpability on the part of American Christians for something that, and that's part of the thrust of the Ken Burns stuff that I didn't care for. That there's a culpability here in American Christendom that I just don't feel like it existed. So
yeah.
um, but that's a lot of words. But um, the I guess what would be good is probably to talk about the kinds of Christians that were awesome during World War II, during the
Yeah.
Holocaust. Um, and going back to your Methodistness, in 2008, the General Conference of the United Methodist Church, which of course does not enumerate saints,
Yeah.
officially recognized Bonhoeffer as a modern day martyr.
Yeah.
And he was the first to be recognized as such. Um, I'm going to leave it to you. Tell me about Bonhoeffer.
Well, I mean, a lot of people will probably have seen the movie at this point, the biographical film about him at this point, I hope. I mean, there were some dramatic liberties taken with his life, but he was German theologian, um, Lutheran. We'll let that slide, you know. But very, very anti-Nazi. Did not like their ideology at all. He saw it for what it was. He was a dissident. Um, he was very much into. If you read his theological works, which I had a mentor who, for several years, pastor mentor of mine, uh, really pushed me to look into Bonhoeffer's works. And one of the first books that I ever read of his was The Cost of Discipleship, and it is one of the best. It is one of the most revealing books because it was at the very big. It was like right at that fringe point of when, if you look at it through the historical lens of what was taking place at the time, you see what he's talking about from a theological perspective. A lot of the things that he's speaking about theologically and what's so important and why uh, the historical context of the audience that he's writing to. It's very important because he's speaking to them about why discipleship is so important in the context of when you're about to save a bunch of people who are going to be murdered, or you're trying to. It's there. The subtext is there, and it's like, and then he ends up being put in one of the camps, and
Yeah.
was subsequently killed in 1945 before the end of the war.
Yeah. It
And
was Flossenburg, I think was where
yes,
he landed.
yes, I couldn't remember the name of it, but that as soon as you see, yeah, Flossenburg, Yeah. And it's a tragic story, but like just but theologically, his he thought that not only did he believe in just the intrinsic value of everyone, but he saw that not that everyone was not only worth what God had invested in us as creation, but that no one was irredeemable.
Very true.
And that was some of what crept through into the film. Uh, in his work in the film, I believe it was like the Hitler Youth, in his efforts to kind of like pull some of those kids back from being recruited by the Hitler Youth, um, was one of the big, kind of like operating themes of the film. Um, just so I look at him and I see like, okay, that is, if anything, one of the greatest models that we could look at and say like, okay, we there are some great parallels because we know that the Nazi story, we know that World War II is not a new story. If anything, I think Haman teaches us that the
This
idea
was
of
definitely a
eradicate,
Gregor.
yeah, yeah, right, is we know that it's not a new idea. We understand that the eradication of Jews is not a new idea, and historically,
Yeah,
it,
I think it was just the first time it was really done to this extent and
well, yeah,
to this. I I think
this
the
was the
hard
most effective it had ever been done. Yeah.
yeah, and the hard part is looking at the figures. People don't understand often. They see the number 6 million. They don't realize that most of the people that were hollowed out, I mean, they completely killed the next generation. I think only if you
Yes.
were only 12% of the children, pre-war Jewish children survived uh, World War II.
Yeah.
And that, we still as Jews have not recovered from the damage done by the Holocaust. And
Well, yeah. I
I
mean, there were whole geographic areas of Estonia, Lithuania, um, uh, geez, I'm blanking.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
just completely
like the Baltic
whole,
states,
yeah,
Poland,
complete,
like that were just emptied of people,
yeah.
like thousands of square miles where just
Well,
towns.
Kapiskis at the time of World War II was 71% Jewish.
Yes,
Uh, what
just
was what
gone.
what was left? And
Yeah, like whole towns gone. And I mean, we can't. I want somebody to like maybe think of we think Fallout is an entertaining TV show, right?
yeah,
Because of the video game. And we don't really consider what that represents in a way what that represents. Think of Fallout as just the aftermath of not nuclear war, but just the complete eradication of a people.
yeah,
And you're
and
just exploring what's left.
exactly. And I
And
think what
you,
makes it even more difficult is when you look at the aftermath of it. It doesn't end. We always say, well, it ends with liberation of Auschwitz. It ends with the liberation of Dachau.
and it doesn't
But
because now we've got people who flat out deny. They say, what, 186,000 is the BS number that I hear thrown around as though that's anywhere remotely near real.
well,
Uh,
it's not even that. It's historically where what the disposition of the Jewish people after World War II.
mhm.
One of the things, one of the highlights I selected from the excerpt was how Leon and Eileen met. They met at the displaced persons camp.
Mm.
She already had her stuff to go to America because Leah's family was, in America trying to get them over. They had a sponsor.
Oh,
She
great.
married
Okay.
married Leon, but uh, you know that 1924 quota was still in place even after the war. And we only took on 400,000 displaced persons after World War II. And of that, only 24% were Jewish. Um, and of course, we're talking about hundreds of thousands after millions had been murdered. So it's like, it's
Right.
not. I mean, it was, I think the remnant of the Jewish people at that point was well under 800,000. I mean, people don't
Yeah.
understand. European Jewry was destroyed. They couldn't go back
Decimated.
home because
Yeah.
anti-Semitism didn't end. I mean, half these places like Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, the Nazis only had to show up and say, "Hey, kill the Jews," and they
Hmm.
found willing accomplices in the local population. So
Yeah.
it's not like people could go back. Um, it's not like they'd want to go back. Where could they
Right.
go? United States absorbs about, 24% of that 400,000 being Jewish. Australia and Canada take on, I think, another sum total
Yeah. It
800,000,
was, yeah, about 800,000. Yeah.
leaving 200,000 with no place to go except for the mandate, the British
Yep.
mandate.
British
And
Mandate, 1948.
so it's like it doesn't
Well,
end right there.
47, I guess, technically. Yeah.
And
But
that's why, like a couple years ago, we were very upset at President Obama for linking the creation of Israel to
hmm,
the Holocaust.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like it all fits on that continuum of oppression. We had nowhere to go. World War II, Europe failed, and then it continued to fail after World War II. The
Hmm.
world continued to fail, and we said as a people, screw you guys. We're never, and that's where like circling back to the we'll get there, I guess, with the message, what we should be learning from the Holocaust as Christians or
Yeah.
Jews. Uh, but that universalist message says of never again looks past the implications. They when we have this very liberal high school friend of ours that she will constantly appropriate.
I
um,
know exactly who you're talking about.
I know she will constantly say, use Anne Frank to tell you why ICE is bad, and
Oh,
she cannot open her mouth once when it comes to Jewish safety and security. And I
yeah.
stay her friend because I know she means well, but man, she could suck it. And anyway, I don't know how else to be polite about it, but like if you're not my friend, if you're not standing up for me and my people, and you're standing up for everybody else, but you're also using figures from the Holocaust to make the case for everybody but me, then you can get all the
Hmm.
way effed. And I love her. I love her. I know what she, but she's not Corey Ten Boom.
Right.
Um, she's not. She's gonna go with the flow. People like her are the same sheep that allowed it to happen, and like everybody thinks they're Corey Ten Boom until it's time to be Corey Ten Boom.
Yeah.
Um, are there other Christians that you look to from World War II besides Bonhoeffer and maybe Corrie Ten Boom? That, I mean, that's
Mm.
the thing. Righteous among the nations. What there are what? I forget how many at Yad Vashem there are. I'd like to say it's like 28,000, somewhere around 28,000.
That's the number I recall.
The majority of them are Christians.
Yeah.
Um, and But that's like a flash in the pan compared to the number of people that probably went to church every Sunday in
Oh, yeah.
Germany or Poland or, those 51 countries. And so are
Well,
there,
and I think, I mean, are there others that would look to?
oh, well, he wasn't particularly Christian.
Yeah, Oscar Schindler. Yeah, I know. I mean, one would be, you'd like to, but yeah, I don't know that he was necessarily devout or a believer. Um, I mean, there are certainly, here's the thing. The ones who did the most, are the ones that you find on the TV shows 60 years later, surrounded by all of the people and their families who they helped smuggle out, like we used to see in the 70s and the 80s. Like that, and that nobody knew who they were, or they never even thought about the fact that they were doing it. They were just the anonymous people who, it's funny, Scott, this brings me back to my message from Sunday. I was teaching about Stephen from the book of Acts, as he was somebody who just did all the little things. He was the guy that set up the chairs. He just showed up and did all the little stuff. Until he pissed off the wrong people, you know? And I would say that those 28,000 were primarily people who were the ones that were setting up the chairs. that were the quiet ones. They just knew that it was the right thing to do and were just doing whatever they had to do to get it done. They
and then
weren't
there,
they
well,
weren't the Dietrich Bonhoeffers. They weren't the Corey Ten Booms. They weren't the ones that ended up being popular later or famous later because they wrote books about it or ended up being able to do press. And that's not to say that Corey Ten Boom like did that deliberately or sought fame, because she didn't. It
right.
was it's just most of them never got the acclaim that one could say they should have gotten a pat on the back publicly for that. Maybe, whatever. But most of the heroes never, most of the people who did that stuff did it because it was the right thing to do.
And
Um,
I like that when you hear the motivation, I love when the motivation is, well, you know, do what you do under the least of these. Um,
you do unto
and
me.
then there are definitely people like the Queen Mother of Romania, who
Mhm.
Helen, who stopped the deportation of their Jews.
Yeah.
And that's and they land on the list. I don't know. I'm in a theodicy course right now, and one of the things that I constantly struggle with, and this is probably a good time to segue into what lessons Christians should draw from the Holocaust. Um, the question, where was God? Why did God let this happen? Those kinds of things. I'm actually never been really consumed with that question. For a variety of reasons, one of which is being a soldier myself and having seen just the savagery that humans are capable of. I didn't need to see it at the scale that happened in the Holocaust to know that if you have that kind of complete societal surrender to that kind of savagery, that bad things can happen. Um, but theologically, it's this is I this this Hasidic Rebbe that was the in the Warsaw Ghetto, and I cannot pronounce. It starts with a P. I will not even try to butcher the pronunciation, but it's Rabbi Shapira wrote these amazing sermons inside the ghetto of Warsaw, wrestling with everything that was happening at the time. And he somewhat controversially interpreted some things like Sarah, our matriarch Sarah, actually commits suicide after hearing about the binding of Isaac, um, as part of his exploration of like, why are all these awful things happening? And his premise was, as he went through this, is like when God when God inflicts suffering on us, there is a point to the lesson.
Mm.
There's a hope of redemption. This is suffering on a scale. There's no answer. There's no theological answer to this. This is there's no. He started off, and you could trace his sermons from like 1940 to 1942, when ultimately he was deported to Treblinka and murdered. Um, you trace this. There's this expectation of divine intervention going into it. It's beautifully naive. It makes me kind of sad to think about it. And then you get to the end of this Esh Kodesh, and these are all these writings. They shoved these sermons in milk crates and buried them in the sewers of Warsaw uh, before the ghetto uprising
Hmm.
and before the liquidation, and they weren't found till after the war. But it's probably one of the only theological voices that comes from within the suffering.
Yeah.
And you know, I know what lessons I'm challenged to find theological lessons from the Holocaust, but I'd be interested in what the Christian take on what theological lessons we should take away from the Holocaust for if you're a Christian. Um,
Oh, that's a
it's a heavy one. I
that
know.
is a heavy question. I mean, and to me, when I hear about things like, that crate, it's kind of like to me, those things are like the modern day Dead Sea Scrolls. It's like those were the preserved records of a people whose voices we now still can hear. And like their history is now recorded because they hid it for a time and we were able to find it. But not to get all like sappy, But I think of John Piper, and I always think about like atheists who ask the question, or anyone really who gets kind of smarmy and they ask the questions like, well, why does God allow evil, or why do you think God can be trusted? And I love John Piper, who was I think he's passed on, but like he was always one of these guys who they would just get up, they would call and he would show up to these debates. And one of the best responses he ever had, he's like, I love that question because I can't help but recall that it was first asked by a snake.
Oh, that's I get. Oh, that's crazy. That's
Yeah,
great. I'm
yeah.
gonna remember that. He's still alive.
He's still alive. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, literally, one of the first things that the devil ever does in scripture is plant that seed of doubt into our minds as to whether or not God can even be trusted. And essentially, and then there's that idea of, well, then is God really good? And then we start to question, and then at that point, then it's all downhill from there. And it's then we start that then we start saying, okay, well then we start asking those questions like, well, uh, why does God allow this and why does God allow that? I mean, that is such a
Naturally, I think Job, the book of Job, is terrible when it comes to theodicy.
I mean, yeah.
My
I,
rabbinical mentor, he says that right out. It's terrible theodicy.
well, there's always
Um,
a great joke that I like to tell at the end of the book of Job.
we get
There's
some new
one
kids, so
thing, there's one thing that God never took away from that poor, poor man, his wife.
yes. Oh, um, the I I think
I'll get in
I
trouble for
just
that one.
and
But
one of the things in Jewish scholarship, one of the things, the bookends of Job, we believe are penciled in after the fact, which I'm sure makes
yeah.
sense to you when you think
Oh yeah.
about it. It's
Well, and like I think good uh uh there's good sourcing for that from a literary grammatical perspective. Like
yeah,
historically, like looking at the text, uh that's one of those where it's like, you know, it's like Isaiah. You know that there's three different Isaiahs,
the
like because there's shifts in language
I
kind
think
of thing,
for
uh,
for
in
me
that regard.
it has always come down to I always felt like Job is not a great, and I'm actually writing about this right now for my other course, but I always thought that Job is not a great corollary for the Holocaust because
No.
um for one, like the wager, the wager between God and Hasatan at the beginning, it's like
Mm,
I I don't like that part, and then the other one
no.
is like, well, and then everything's okay at the end, he gets new kids, and
Honestly, to me, the best corollary, and it's not even a corollary, Habakkuk, because it's somebody standing on the edge of destruction, and I just love that visual of the idea of Habakkuk standing on the wall, and that idea of yet I will remain, and
it's
just all this destruction is going to come, but I have the hope of knowing that God is going to be good to his word and is going to make good to this promise that there is another day. I may not live to see it, yet I will remain, right? I
that
know that.
that brings me back to, and I'm gonna actually get you a copy of this book. I think you would really love it. The Esh Kodesh, um, these sermons that he wrote. Um,
Okay.
he comes to the point where he is the song at the sea, in Hebrew. Uh, the preface to it is will sing. They use the future tense. The children of Israel will sing. Uh, and and a lot of that's the basis for the belief in the resurrection of the dead in Judaism, is that we will sing, and it also is a template in a sense for every victory over desperate situations that we will have. And I think that this rabbi got to the point where he's in the Warsaw Ghetto, he's seeing this suffering, he's living this suffering for years.
Mm.
He can't see a living generation do this. The Jewish people are, in his mind, are going to be extinguished. And the only way that God is going to make good on his redemption is literally by raising the dead.
Mm.
Uh, and you think about a Hasidic master, what a departure from everything you might know about Hasidic Jewish thought, from the Baal Shem Tov down to Menachem Mendel Schneerson. None of that's almost like antithetical to Hasidic
Right.
thought, and his is like the only hope that we have for God to fulfill God's promise to us is for the resurrection of the dead to take place.
Hmm.
And you think about I mean, it's still hope, but my God, what a depressing form of hope was left. Um, I don't know. Again, I really struggle with theological messages from it, other than that, you know, I think that, God destroyed. I think it's embedded in the story of the flood. God destroyed the world because we were wicked, and with the flood, and then at the end of it, it said, I'm not going to do that again. And I think part of the implication there is that you people, you have a whole lot of agency to get this stuff right or wrong.
Hmm.
I'm not getting involved. It's on you guys. I gave you the template, I gave you the framework. Now roll with it. And I, you know, and I think that's where I get frustrated. Is like, yeah, Israel's been heavy-handed in Gaza. I get it, heavy-handed in southern Lebanon, but I look back at the Holocaust and that continual string of Arab aggression that took place before and after the Holocaust, before and after
Right.
Israel was founded. European anti-Semitism absolutely didn't go away. Um, you know, to me, like, the Jewish people have made at least half of us, have made the decision that never again means we're not looking to you guys to fix it for us. And we don't care what you think. We're going to make killing us expensive.
Mm.
And the world doesn't like that. And I get it. I would never abstract away the suffering of innocent Palestinians. I think that would definitely not be my intent.
Oh no,
But
absolutely not.
because there are a lot of people who have been caught up in this horror on all sides, but we get to survive, and
Yeah.
that's the lesson of the Holocaust, and for us. And I don't know if that's the same message that Christians should necessarily have, but
Well, I mean, I think it is in a way because if it's not, it shouldn't be exactly that, but it should be a variation on that. The suffering, no suffering is ideal and is not okay, right? But in the same way, Israel has a right to survive, right? I think we must recognize that. And so what I become very frustrated in the Methodist Church, especially when I hear people now, and I see them wearing, like I said, I see them wearing these freaking Palestinian keffiyehs, like in the ones that Arafat used to wear, and and I s- and I start hearing them say, and they know what it means.
oh, from the river to the sea.
Mm,
Finally, I'm noticing lately that people are finally pointing out what the words are in Arabic,
mm-hmm.
and it's not Palestine will be free. It's
No.
Palestine will be Arab.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very radically different thing. But that's very
It's a very different
typical.
message. Yeah.
And that's very typical. culturally, it's very acceptable to talk out of two sides of the mouth, and it's
Oh
not
yeah.
popular to say it because, but that's people holding them to Western standards. It's not problematic in that culture, and
No.
uh, but it's problematic for us. And
Well,
um,
yeah. So, I mean, from a Christian perspective, I would say we need to back up. We need to actually really do the research. I mean, I see people who, will will spout all the, we need to stop the genociding stuff without even being able to point to where Gaza is on a map. They can't even describe who is actually being killed. They can't, like I said, they can't point to Gaza on a map. They don't actually even know where it's happening. They don't know what caused it, but they're willing to stand up and chant all about it and yell at other people about it. That's problem number one. Then the second problem is, uh, that sort of thing. They don't understand what it is that they're agreeing with, and they don't understand the root arguments behind it. They don't realize how they're being played, and then you'll see, like I saw a video the other day where there were people, there were I guess you could call them like Arab influencers at a protest, and they were standing next to American protesters, and other. I think they were maybe it was a. I think they were in the UK. They were standing next to fellow protesters in the UK, and they were walking along, and they were like, "Look at this idiot!" And they were speaking in.
oh, that's interesting.
They're speaking in Arabic, and they were saying, "Look at this moron!" Like if we were back here, I would kill him. Like they were
Uh,
actually saying that, yeah. And they don't the person there's like they're standing there behind them like, yeah, had no idea that this person's saying like, I would absolutely kill this person in our back in our country.
we
Or like look at this idiot. Like they have no idea like that, I mean they were actually mocking the people that were protesting on their behalf. Like,
it's so difficult because one of the problems here I find is even there are a lot of people that are really well intentioned in their in their claims of genocide, and I think that they're going right to the wrong extreme. It doesn't have to be genocide for it to be awful.
well, no, true.
Um,
Exactly.
it and I could even make the case that with the displacement of the populations that have taken place, that there's you could I could hear an ethnic cleansing argument, but the problem
Hmm.
is like they're not, especially when they start making the case to start having other countries take them on.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some bad stuff like starving a population, heavy-handed munitions, those things. I get it. Those are
Yes.
all things that are legitimate to complain about.
Hmm.
But the problem comes in for me when it's the implication that Jews of all people should know better. And the
Yeah.
whole thing, it's like the whole thing is yes, we do.
Sorry,
We
you're
do
gonna
know
woke
better.
scold me about like
Yeah.
what you're gonna.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What? That's
Yeah.
well. It's like when an atheist gets on a Christian's back about what Scripture says and how a Christian's supposed to act, and I'm like, you literally just quote one line out of Scripture and act like you know what the whole Bible says. Like, please spare me. You mentioned like I wanted to get back to your question. You asked me that like very weighty theological question about evil.
Yeah.
And I did want to respond to that. I mean, and it is a weighty answer that never satisfies anyone. But and it is it's exactly that. And because it never actually really answers the question to anyone's satisfaction because it's an answer that we don't understand.
Yes. And
And because ultimately it's left to God and we don't like that because it's not a solution that we can control.
it's
But at the end of
unfathomable. It's
it's
unfathomable.
yep. But I mean, we comes down to it, the fact that evil is real and it's not something that God desires or God has willed. That He gave us free will
Yeah.
and we broke it, and we are part of the explanation of why evil exists in the world. I
And
mean,
we're
it's part of the
breaking it
creed,
again.
and we're
We're
breaking it
break.
again.
Yeah.
And and then the fact that God can bring redemption out of evil, right, without causing evil. right? And that's part of the Christian story, right? And then the fact that he's presented a solution to the problem. Once again, this is part of the Christian story. That God ultimately has an answer for that evil, but that final judgment, that resolution is future state. It's not yet. So this is one of the reasons why, you know, nobody's really satisfied with the answers because, you know, everybody says, well, what if he could just fix it? Why doesn't he just fix it? And it's always that, well, I don't know. But at
You
the
know,
same time, like, well, if it, if he could just fix it, well, you know what? He wants to know who really wants it. Like I frankly, I don't want my son to like it's how we parent our kids. And
yeah,
I think people who are parents know exactly what God is doing because we've all done it with our kids at some point. We want to know if our kid really wants the thing that they're asking for. And so in a way, we all kind of let them stew on the desire for what it is that they say they want. Like, do they really want that? Do I? And we watch them work for it. And it's not that like God is trying to like test us or torture us or like, but like we have the free will to go after it. And he's shown us how to do it. He's given us the roadmap to get there. Like we have all of the direction of how to achieve it. And we have the will, but do we actually, have the, do we actually have the will to do it? And you know, and if I were looking at it from the Wesleyan perspective, of course, like if I were to take it back over to the Methodist tradition, you know, God genuinely desires a relationship, a loving relationship with us, and that requires real freedom. That requires that we can mess up. That requires that we can say no,
yeah.
right? And that we have to be able to say no, otherwise it's not real at all. And that doesn't make God morally evil. But that's also one of the problems I have with Calvinism. That's a theological debate I'm not going to get into tonight because that's a whole nother thing. But like the idea that God is out there and he is working ahead of us, like he knows he wants to save us. So he's out there like creating opportunities to get our attention. And like I know too well in my life that God has done stuff to get my attention and say, dude, really
I,
get over
you
here.
know,
Like, like, and somebody says, "Why didn't God do anything?" Like, it's like that scene. You ever see Bruce Almighty?
yeah, yeah,
He's like driving along in the car, and he's like, "Why won't you give me a sign?" And there's that truck full of signs that says like "Turn around, wrong way," like, and then he eventually crashes the car because he's not paying attention. It's like that, like we don't want to take responsibility for it, and then eventually, like, we have to come to the realization that we live in a fallen world. It is a broken world. God wants to fix it, and He's going to do it eventually, but it's not abandoned. Like God hasn't left us behind. And
and I'm sure Christians would theologically agree that we're also not waiting for God to fix it, that we're trying to do incremental fixes as we can as well
yeah,
along
yeah.
the way.
And he wants
And
to see that. Like that's because that's part of the faith is that when we have faith, part of our faith is an outpouring of works that result from our belief. It's the mitzvah.
one of the key differentiators, and I say this was as someone that had his feet in both worlds, is that and I think you do too for to a certain degree on this one as well. You know, we you know Jewish theology is really heavily defined by recurring catastrophe, at least since, I mean, there's been stuff, along the way.
Yeah.
But our intersection with Europe in particular, starting with the First Crusade and the Rhineland massacres and all the way through the
Mm.
Holocaust, um, it has probably irrevocably defined our theology, as one where we are carrying, just as part of our theology, we're carrying this unbearable memory forward. Uh, in our faith. And one of the things that I see the average Christian not having to reconcile, and I think it's different. Again, I think it's different for you. Um, but the average Christian doesn't seem to be carrying that kind of weight of memory. Yeah, it's always kind of a little more abstracted. Oh gosh, yeah, our Protestant ancestors were persecuted in Germany, so we came over here. Our Protestant ancestors were prosecuted in Great Britain,
Yeah,
so we came
I
over
would say
here.
most of us have no recollection, genetic or otherwise, that of any of the persecution of the church. I would venture to guess that most modern Christians have no idea of the vitriol and violence between the Protestant and Catholic churches. And part of the reason that for the formation of the United States at all, rather the colonies, is for the very fact that that existed.
Yeah.
Like most people, I would say, don't even know
So they don't
that that's a
embed tragedy in their theological memory.
no.
And
And I mean, I think we're off. To quote Ted Lasso, we are goldfish. I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso.
do, do you feel like I mean, this is a perilous question. Ted Lasso. This is a perilous question, but probably maybe a good one to close on. Is it a theological deficiency to not have tragedy embedded in your theology? Um,
I mean, the thing is that I think we do. I think the problem is that most Christians don't have the knowledge of it. It's there scripturally. Like, I mean, we've got all the tragedy there, the same tragedy. Well, not all the same tragedy, because we don't have the modern history of it. We have the theological heritage of it in the same sense of biblically. We don't have the modern history of it. Um, we don't have that shared modern history. In some cases, we're the perpetrators of that shared modern history. Uh, you know, so in that regard, no.
well, you straddle an interesting, personally straddle an interesting position
Yeah,
in all, but it's
I get the awesome adventure of seeing it from both sides,
yeah.
uh, and like hating myself from both sides. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, just being aware of it. Honestly, what if anything else, like coming at this from both sides has made me, I want to say, like hyper aware of the history of just all of it, and and like the driving forces behind the faiths, as well as how the faiths have moved, how the faiths have moved history and have shaped the history around the world, um, to the point that, like, I mean, people don't even understand, like, just even we talk about colonialism today, and people love to rail on colonialism, but like, don't even understand that, like the British monarchy, how much the role the British monarchy has played out of just the aspect of the existence of the Church of England, like the Anglican Church, like
Uh,
literally exists. The I mean, so much of colonialism from the world's perspective exists, and the spread of the Anglican Church, like the British colonialism exists simply because of that. Like not like just people don't even realize. They just think, oh, it's British colonialism. No, it was primarily driven by uh like, well, one, greed, but also the desire to evangelize
yeah.
and spread the Anglican spread the message of the Bible through the Anglican Church.
And, and also
It's like
just to live
most people
somewhere
don't even
where
know.
and also just to live somewhere where you're not going to get killed for it, which is, pretty
Yeah,
important. I mean,
exactly.
it's so complicated. I really feel like a lot of any kind of catchphrase that's trying to deconstruct things, I think 90% of the time it ends up being very reductive because it's not driven by academics, it's driven by like
It's all
essentially
emotion.
street, yeah,
Yeah.
pathos laden street urchins, and it's
Well, people hear something that sounds profound,
yeah.
but it's uninformed and it's catchy, but it's uninformed and woefully inaccurate.
and and there's
But it
something.
sounds cool. It sounds important, and it's easily repeatable. And I can go out on the street and maybe get a couple of bucks for standing out on the street corner and chanting it for a few hours.
Well,
And therefore, I'm cool and I'm important and I can make money now, right? And now I'm part of the movement.
yeah.
What
I-
movement? Like, you're just, you can't even name 50 states,
and if I bring
you
it
know.
back to
You
if
don't
I
even
bring
know
it
what
back to
continent we're on,
if I bring it
but
back to the Holocaust on this, then the the real lesson I wish that like we could export from the Jewish perspective for all of these folks is that you can't unwind it. Um, there were some reparations paid by German companies that used slave labor. There,
yep,
Germany was
Volkswagen,
really,
yeah,
really good to
quite a
Israel
few of them.
because, yeah. Um, but you can't unwind what was done. You can't put a price on these things, and a lot of this stuff we can't unwind what we did to the indigenous peoples in the United States, and it wasn't great to say it mildly. Um, but like this we're so many generations removed, you know, a land back statement doesn't fix it, but giving tribes sovereignty in your state does. And um those kinds of things. I we can only ever move forward, and I think that's the lesson that the Jewish people took away from the Holocaust is not a theological one so much because there are no easy answers there, but how do you keep going? How do you rebuild? How do you reconstitute yourselves? And how do you pick up and move on and not let, even though it's going to, not let it define who you're going to be?
Yeah.
Um, I wish we could share that lesson. I just sometimes I don't think people they want to universalize all the wrong messages of the Holocaust, and
Yes.
that's
Well,
that
it's
everybody
because those are the easiest messages to take and use towards something else.
yeah. I think sometimes the most obvious lesson that people take from the Holocaust, and it's the wrong one, is that everybody that's doing something bad is Hitler. And
Yeah.
and I've been guilty of that. It's like, oh gosh, I was convinced that the second Bush administration, George W. Bush, Huh.
Well, yeah,
I was
everybody's
convinced that,
literally Hitler.
yeah, the Reichstag fire was just we're gonna upend Congress, and and maybe Trump might do that before he leaves office. I don't know, but at the same time, if you go
Yeah.
around looking for Hitler, you're gonna find Hitler. Um,
Yeah.
but
That's
if
what
you,
I remember. There was a meme that was like a kid's book.
yeah,
It was like and it was like a golden book, but it was like a
everybody I
little
don't like,
Adolf. Yeah, everybody I
everybody,
don't like is Hitler, and it was like a little Adolf riding on like a four-poster bed through the
yeah.
clouds, and it was like,
And now,
yeah,
here we are, 80 years after, 70, 80 years after the Holocaust, and you know, and the people that have spent the last several years telling us that we need to deconstruct all the things and wake up and do right are the ones that are now telling us that a guy with a Nazi tattoo is an acceptable candidate for the highest
dude,
office in the state.
the
And
the straight up gaslighting, and it just blows my mind
uh,
that I cannot fathom how we go from everybody I don't like is Hitler to, hey, you know what? This guy's totally cool.
right,
Even though he thinks, even though he's totally down with the R word. I'm not going to say it because you're going to put this on YouTube. You know, the grape problem in the military. He's totally down with that. And he's got this Nazi tattoo that he got while he was in Kosovo, and it's a place where it's illegal, and it's clearly what it is. And he got it in a place that knew what they were putting on the man.
well, that's not who he is today, you see, and
Right, right, right,
with
right, right.
no action to prove it. But
Right. Well,
that's who we
this is
are.
this is my biggest issue with that, right? Is that if this were somebody from the other side of the aisle.
I've got a great example for you. Elizabeth Warren went ape poop about Pete Hegseth's tattoos. The
Right.
tweets are
Deus
all out
Vult,
there.
even though, like, oh, dude, the Deus Vult tattoo. Glory to God. It's the Jerusalem cross. It's a Crusader cross. Has absolutely nothing to do with the Nazi party. She's losing her mind.
But the guy has literal Nazi tattoo, and he's our
Oh,
guy.
just,
And
just, just,
I
youthful indiscretions.
I can't do it with these guys anymore. I just
Ah,
so like if there are lessons to learn from the Holocaust, it's like, they're never going to take the right ones. And in every other case, it's interesting, like the critical race theory, and there are some good elements, bad elements academically about these things. For me, it's never like a black and white, all bad, all good. And I refuse to go all in or all out on anything anyway. But the what's fascinating to me is it's like, well, listen to the aggrieved, listen to the victims. What are they? They're the ones that define what is and isn't racism, unless they're Jewish.
all right.
And then we have the problem. We have we have the pick me's, the folks that dilute the message. They don't stand a part of an organized Jewish community, but they speak on behalf of Jews, and they're the people that are willing to be tokenized and ruin it for everybody else. And you know, I but you can't tell them that. It's like if you as a black person don't listen to Clarence Thomas, then I, as a Jewish person, don't want you listening to this schmuck from Jewish Voice for Peace. Uh,
Well,
that
and I recall the very words that were said by a now former president when he was in the Senate grilling then uh, candidate for the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas.
yeah,
And they were not nice things.
no. And what it's that old song from the Marx Brothers, whatever you're for, I'm against it.
Yes.
I I hate to think that politics are so venal, but they are, and that's
Well,
why as
dude,
theologian,
I
I
think
just don't want to be
honestly,
in it anymore. That's
if I think if and I think this is true of pretty much all politicians and maybe even quite a few people within the political church is that if they weren't for double standards, they wouldn't have any.
oh, that's so true.
But yeah,
Well, I appreciate you
I know
joining
I'm
me
going to be
tonight.
super popular if any of my people see these.
Well, it's important topics to have. I'm pretty hard on the pick me set. I have avoided it as much as I can, but I'm at the point where the only thing I have to do is stay Jewish and die.
Dude, I'll
It
tell you, and I'm so over
Well, and
the,
pay taxes, but
well, yeah, that too. Yeah, death and taxes is all real. Uh, this is one of the things that I love about, okay, so yeah, I'm so over a lot of this nonsense, right? When it comes to the church. Like, it's just like, it has nothing, so much of this has absolutely nothing to do with,
wait, your mission is to change lives through Christ, right? I mean, that's what you're
so much
supposed to do.
of what we are doing as a denomination has nothing to do with any of this. And that drives me insane. And then there's the fact that I am very, very solidly Generation X, and I have zero things to give. In fact, gaze upon the field in which I grow them and see that it is barren.
Yeah, right.
Like, I am so over all of these things. I don't do this for the money. I do this because I love God and I love
Yeah.
people. I don't do this for the money. Like, they could fire me tomorrow. I'm still showing up for work.
Just
That's, yeah.
That's it. I've been taking a page from our congregational rabbi on this. He's been very, I think he's been kind of muted because there are things that he doesn't want to say on a live stream, that he could say in an intimate church in synagogue setting. Um, but I'm at this point where if somebody says the genocide word, knowing the Holocaust history, and and lecturing a Jew about what we should have learned from the Holocaust. I what I'm hearing is that they just are telling me yet again that half the world's Jewish population does not get to live in peace and security. And that's a non-starter. That is the very first lesson of the Holocaust is that Jews get to live in peace. Uh, and if they really looked hard at it, if the Arabs stopped attacking, if they had not attacked after 1948, if they had not attacked in 1967, if they had not attacked in 1973, peace has always been achievable. A Palestinian state has always been achievable. And at some point, we just have to be. There's this very real temptation, and I get it, to kind of mute, like, and I struggle with this to mute the needs of the Jewish people. It's like, at some point, we get to exist on this very narrow sliver of land somewhere. Now, I'm choosing to exist in Maine, but if I chose to exist in Israel, it's like smaller than New Jersey. Can't we just can't we just have that? Can we just, and the answer is increasingly no. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna recruit my friends and I'm gonna come back at you with a shillelagh and I'm what we have here in the United States as Jews is worth fighting for, but I also feel like what Jews have in Israel is worth fighting for. And shame on anybody that mutes himself in this time or takes sides against us. So
Yeah.
that's my lesson from the Holocaust. So that's
Heck yeah, man.
uh,
I'm not down to see it happen again. And
no.
and this is part of the reason why I speak up about what I see happening in our denomination. And yeah, I'm just not sticking around for it.
Well,
Like I'm
next session is anti-Zionism, and or
hmm,
Zionism and the state of Israel. And
all right.
we've flogged that so heavily. I gotta wonder if there's a way we can talk about it that's purely theological, and because
Hmm.
we know where we stand, and
We know
people
where
that
we
listen to these
stand.
podcasts know where we
Well, and I
stand.
think, yeah, I think if well, I don't think if they haven't picked it up by now, um, if you haven't guessed, listeners,
We like
I'm very
Israel.
sorry. We like Israel. Yeah. Um,
uh,
yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd be down to talk about it. I mean, from a theological perspective, it's the struggle that I have is I know where that discussion will likely end up. At least on my side, will be uh, God, I'll be talking out of Romans 11 again. Um, I really cannot stand replacement theology, and it drives me insane. And there has been so much, like literally, my Twitter has been just nothing but like Sola Chad and like all these people who are going after each other over replacement theology versus like, oh, just all of it.
it's
And
a
it's just
feature, not a. It's thanks to Augustine, it's a feature, not a bug.
not a bug. Yeah.
It's.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
we could talk about cool stuff about it. Like what the prospects for peace are. What we as Jews and Christians can do to because there are a lot of Christians in Israel too. It's not
oh yeah.
It's a Jewish state, but it's a pluralistic society and
Yeah.
uh,
I'll tell you what, we could talk about some of the activities that have been taking place in southern Lebanon. In some of those Christian towns.
it's too bad. I just
Uh,
I just God, it's so beautiful there
that
on
that
both
BB
sides of the
keeps having to
border.
apologize for.
Yeah, it'd just be nice to like can we just come to like a day with no rockets, a day with no
For
rockets
real.
and no
No.
heavy-handed reciprocity.
All joking aside, like I mean, I have a friend of mine who lives in northern Israel, not too far from the border. And it's been a few years now, but I want to say it was like 2024. And his village and the next village over where his dentist lives. And this is going to sound funny, but it's his dentist's kids were out playing, in the afternoon, and like it was a day when like the sirens were going off like all day, and the sirens had finally shut off, and all the kids went outside. It was like sunset, and all the kids went outside, and they were outside playing soccer, and and like damn if they didn't let a couple rockets go, and they landed right on that soccer field, killed like 21 kids.
Oh yeah, that was the Drews, wasn't it? The
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was awful. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
And
there's a
that
lot to talk.
was two
So
of the
we
dentist kids were in that group.
we can there's stuff to talk about without having to get too heavy into the because we know where the Methodist Church is on Zionism, and we even know where we know where most
Yeah.
mainline
Sorry, that for
denominations.
those who don't see that, because I know how Zoom works, I like almost very nearly rolled my eyes about where the Methodist Church stands on Zionism.
I
For if you don't know, the Methodist Church does not like Zionism and is not a supporter of Israel. Uh, and I think the Methodist Church, in that regard, is dumb. So
so
we'll leave it there until next time.
we could avoid that the next week if you want. I
Oh, we don't
mean,
have to. No, I'm
I,
absolutely down with that. And frankly, John Wesley would be like, honestly, he could probably power the Eastern Seaboard with how fast he'd be rolling over in his grave with the stuff that the Methodist Church has been doing these last 5 years.
I
So
think the Baptists are the only Protestant dominate denomination left that are not, and it kind of stinks because it's like, the Baptists don't have a great reputation outside of Baptists.
no,
I
they really
mean,
don't. And
they find a
because
way to.
they've also, well, yeah, they've found ways to. So I wish I wish they would have adopted some of the things that the Methodists had adopted, and it would have saved them. People would be able to look at them now, and they would be in a much better position, like morally. And that is to say that, like, had they adopted some of the policies that the Methodist Church had adopted, like safe sanctuaries, um, and that is to say, we have a policy. So, if you're not familiar, right, Methodist Church has this policy called safe sanctuaries. Really cool policy in the sense that it requires like two up leadership. You can't, like, an adult leader can't go into like restroom with kid by themselves. Like you can't, like
This
there's
just
all
protects
kinds of protections.
everybody.
Yeah, and it also for it's at risk adults too. So like mentally impaired adults are also protected by the same policy. So like young or old, like this policy protects you. And not only does it protect those at risk, it also protects staff. It protects pastors, it protects churches. It is a great policy. It is a pain in the
Insurers love it,
butt.
and the actuarial
Yes.
people love it.
The actuarial PS. Insurers absolutely, and there's a reason we update this policy like every other year, and make sure that we have an updated copy on file and everybody's read it. Uh, because yes, but like because Boy Scouts of America exists in the Methodist Church as a presence, and yeah, thanks BSA for that massive lawsuit. Anyway,
Canteen
you know,
boy.
yeah.
Sorry, I can't. That's awful. I can't.
Oh God, yeah. But it had if honestly, if SBA had a policy like that in place, or rather, I'm sorry, SBC had a policy like that in place, they'd probably be like one of the most morally grounded, without harm denominations in existence. But they didn't, and as a result, they've got all kinds of problems. They're like the Baptist Catholics, bouncing pastors all over the place and having all kinds of issues like that.
Well, next week too, I will also ping you then about the where you think post-denominational Christianity fits into the Zionism and Israel thing. So
Ooh,
we don't have to answer that tonight, but
ooh,
I
that's a whole
wonder.
nother long discussion.
Well, it's worth it
Well,
because you have to
let's
wonder
put
where
it this
you're
way.
heading.
Let's put it this way, right? I have yet to find a non-denominational church or an independent church that if you look at their mission statement and their beliefs and their doctrinal statements, they're basically Baptist.
It's,
9 times out of 10, you look at their doctrinal statements, Baptist. Like they're basically Baptist churches. Almost all of them.
Crypto
Non-denominational.
Baptists.
Yeah, I mean, And it's not like I don't think it's intentional. I just don't think they realize that that's what they do. And it's
That's
not like that's bad necessarily. It's just like some of the stuff that they proclaim in terms of their belief systems just naturally kind of fall in with Baptists. What ends up happening as a result of that, we can talk about next week because they think
sounds
they own
good.
the Holy Land. But and that's a problem.
Can you put a
Okay.
rainbow in your pocket? And all right,
Oh
man.
man. All right, dude. Yeah.
Well, thank
Don't
you so
preach like
much
my
for
brother,
joining
right?
us, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, man. It's awesome.
All right. Don't
All right.
preach like my brother.
Don't preach like my brother.
Have a good one.
All right, man. You too. See ya.